Yesterday it was announced there is an animated series in the works for Grounded. In this video, I'm going to take a look at the announcement as well as discuss what I think it means for the future of the game. Before we begin, I want to thank Handsome Ivan, Lyndon Dade, Mateo Solis, Matthew Campbell, Stephen Band, the Overseer 91, and all my other channel members and patrons for helping make videos like this possible. If you want to support the channel by becoming a member or patron, links for both are down in the description. Thanks again to all my channel members and patrons. Let's get started. As I mentioned, yesterday it was announced that there's an animated series in the works for Grounded. It was reported by Deadline, and here's the little article. We're going to skim through it really quickly. Xbox video game Grounded in the works as animated series from Star Wars Clone Wars, Brent Freeman. So let's just skim down here real quick. Grounded is the latest video game that's being adapted as a TV series. It was inspired by A Bug's Life and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and is being adapted by Star Wars Clone Wars writer Brent Freeman. I did a little research on Star Wars Clone Wars. It's not a show that I watched, but there were episodes for it from 2008 to 2020. I think there were 7 seasons. From what I saw, it was pretty well received. Most of the reviews I saw for it were pretty high. So it looked like, and I did look at a little clip of it, did look pretty decent. It marks the latest video game to get a television treatment following the likes of Netflix, Arcane, and Paramount's Halo. Arcane did pretty well. Halo, I think, has been a little bit more mixed. The series, which exists in the same universe as the game, follows 4 friends who, the summer before high school, plan big things to elevate their social standing, but their plans are upended when they stumble upon a shrinking technology that makes them 2 inches tall. Now the 4 shrunken friends must learn to survive in a towering backyard that's a jungle full of enormous predators and hiding in a vast corporate conspiracy threatening their entire town. So that makes it sound like this animated series is basically just going to follow through the game. So I'm not sure if they're going to elaborate on things that are not in the game, but as of right now, it just kind of like gives a high-level picture of what the game's going to be about. Of course, we will see what the conclusion to the game is before the series comes out because there's no mention of a date in here. Down here, it's just going to give a little more information. The game was released in early access in 2020. It's had over 10 million players. We know that. It's coming out. Its full release is planned for September. Obsidian and Xbox are adapting the game into a series and associated with these different companies. Friedman also wrote on Star Trek Enterprise. If you're a Star Trek fan, cool. I'm definitely a Star Trek fan. This is from the early 2000s and is adapting Earthworm Jim into a series. So it looks like this guy has a track record, or he's going to have a track record of adapting video games into animated series, which is pretty cool. He also worked on the Halo video game, attached to direct. I don't know what that means. Actually, from what I looked at his profile, it looked like he worked on some of the cinematics from the newer Halos. So nothing to do with actually like the game, but actually it was doing the cinematics. So if you're not a fan of the 343 games, no worries there. This guy just did the cutscenes, which are pretty high quality and stuff along those lines. Move Comes, the development team will be hosting an in-person booth at San Diego Comic-Con. We know that that's going to be later this week. Actually, it'll be starting 2 days from now when I'm recording this. The show will then be taken to Kidscreen and MIPCOM later this year. So I guess they're going to be showing, maybe they're going to be showing footage of it, which will be pretty cool. We couldn't be more excited about diving into the whimsical universe of Grounded. This partnership will be one of the great collaborations expanding on an already wonderful journey of exploration and adventure, said Tina Chow, CEO of Bardell Entertainment. Team of Obsidian have created an incredible world that has already grabbed the attention of the gaming community. We are excited to work with our incredible partners to bring the story to life in an animated series, added Carl Whiteside, MD, WPSC Productions. So I'm definitely looking forward to this. Of course, you guys know I have almost 800 hours in Grounded. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is one of my favorite childhood movies, so I'm definitely up to watching this. I mean, I've enjoyed recently, even though I'm an adult, I still do watch some cartoons. I've recently watched most of the the Jurassic Park series. I can't remember what it's called. Jurassic World, Jurassic Park, whatever the show, Camp Cretaceous. Camp Cretaceous. I've been watching that with my kids on Netflix. I did watch a little bit of the Arcane, but I'm not into League of Legends really that much, so I watched an episode or so of that, and then I just kind of turned it off because couldn't get into it. But this being a game that I've played a lot, as well as a movie that I definitely enjoyed when I was growing up as a kid and have watched many times since then, definitely looking forward to this. So what I want to do now is I'm going to hop over real quick. I'm going to look at the actual 1.0 trailer and see if that gives us any insight into what the series might look like. And then I'm going to talk about how I think this might impact the future of the game after the 1.0 release. So I wanted to quickly look at the beginning of the trailer. Now I'm going to mute this just so we can mute it. And we're just going to play through this. So I'm kind of interested to see I'm wondering if this is going to be how the series looks. I don't think it's going to be. This kind of looks like it's an 80s cartoon, although maybe it would figure into it. The series could look something like this. So let's just hit play real quick. Let it play through. And we're going to see this commercial here. We've got the Puncho guy, and then it kind of exits out of this. Now, this could be very well what the animated series is going to look like. Maybe they were working on this before the actual announcement. I'm sure they were. Or maybe it's going to look more like a cutting edge thing, maybe like the Arcane series, maybe like some of the other recently adapted things to animation. So anyway, I don't know. Let me know what you think. Do you think it's going to be looking more like the retro thing, or do you think they're going with a more modern look for the series? Let me know in the comments down below. But now that we got that out of the way, I want to jump into talking about how I think this might affect after 1.0 and whether or not it'll actually impact what happens after 1.0 for Grounded. So as we all know, Grounded is planned to be fully released in September. We're expecting a public test server update before then, more likely than not, sooner rather than later. In fact, it might be as soon as like the end of July. If not, it's going to be sometime in August, I would imagine, because we're going to need time for us to test that stuff out. Whatever they're putting in there, test it out so they can make any changes to it before 1.0. At this point, I would imagine the story is complete. Otherwise, how would they be planning an animated series around it? So they definitely have the story in place, just need to put it into the game. And what I'm wondering is, I guess the timing of the series, it kind of depends on when it's going to come out. There's no announcement yet, and I can't imagine this thing's going to be put together in just a matter of a couple of months. So maybe it's not going to happen until next year. But with them doing this, it's kind of a surprise to me. It's actually like a pleasant surprise because I didn't anticipate this happening, although it is definitely like something that would have made sense, because with it being based on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and A Bug's Life, shows that even children nowadays could watch and would enjoy the movies, both those movies, as well as the game being kind of kid-friendly with the aesthetics of it, even though there is it's a little more sinister behind the scenes. I do think it makes sense for it to be an animated series. And what I'm wondering is if they're going to put this out maybe sometime next year, and maybe along with it, maybe they add some kind of, maybe a big content update or something like that. Right now, the only plans that we know of after 1.0 are there's going to be bug fixes, and they did mention some stuff like cosmetic things, like adding stuff bugs for all the rest of the bugs that don't have them, wall mount stuff like that, perhaps new building pieces. There's lots of stuff on the feature board that hasn't been added, but we don't know right now whether or not that's ever going to make it into the game. It's certainly not going to all make it in before 1.0, but what happens after 1.0? What if the animated series, they put it out there and it takes off and it's a huge success? How long will the series run? I don't know how they could break it up. I mean, if you think about it, they could extend the series for several seasons if they wanted to. Maybe they're going to do, although maybe it's just planned to have one season. I don't really know at this point. There's been really little, obviously there's been no information provided. Just playing through the game up to the point where we have and not really knowing what has not been added, other than knowing that only a portion of the map hasn't been updated, and that we're more likely than not, I would guess, about 3/4 of the way through the actual gameplay. I'm guessing there's about a quarter of the game left, maybe a little bit more. That's going to come in the 1.0. So looking at that and how long it takes to get through it, how long could they put that into an animated series? Honestly, it probably would make sense to have it just be one season and maybe like 10 episodes. Although I could see them, depending on how long the episodes are, if they're only like 20, 30-minute episodes, they could easily extend it out to multiple seasons. I mean, looking back at the Camp Cretaceous, that's on like season 4 or 5 at this point, and that could have easily been done in 1 or 2 seasons. But you can just do side stories, go into the things that are not in the game right now, like in the animated series. Maybe they have a full episode about each of the 4 different characters, or multiple episodes about things that we have not been introduced to them in the game. Maybe their side stories, maybe their families, maybe their life outside before this, what their plans were for the future. They could go down the line of Dr. Wendell, all those things. There's lots of things they could dive into that aren't necessarily going to make it into the game, that could expand upon the lore of the game. So they could very easily extend this out to multiple seasons, although at least one season of 10 episodes would make sense. And I guess maybe what I'm thinking is maybe they're putting this out there as a feeler. Maybe if it does well, maybe if it releases sometime like early next year, if it does super well, maybe they'll consider adding a major DLC for the game. Because honestly, at this point, I think the only way to get more content would be if they do some kind of DLC. Although maybe the plan would be for a sequel. Would a sequel make sense? I don't know. There was multiple Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movies, even though the first one was obviously the best. After that, it was kind of like each one was less and less interesting, and it kind of just felt like they were just making them just for the sake of making them. Perhaps they make a sequel to this game. I think that could make sense, although we don't really know what the end of the story is going to be. If the kids get unshrunk, if they go along the same lines, they get reshrunk or something like that, or maybe the sequel is actually a prequel and talks about things before that. Who knows? I think maybe what this is doing is just trying to expand the reach of Xbox games to get it out to a more broader audience, because there's been actually talks about Xbox possibly acquiring Netflix. I haven't done a lot of research on that. I just saw a couple mentions of it over the last couple days. So perhaps this is going to be a Netflix series. It doesn't really say what it's going to be on, but that would make sense. Maybe if they're going to do something like that, they want to expand out of that. Maybe they want to just put it out there and see what happens. And if there's a lot of interest in it, then they put resources back on Grounded. Because like I've already talked about, Obsidian's working on multiple other games right now. They're definitely working on Avowed and The Outer Worlds 2, both AAA RPG games that involve tons and tons of work. And they are but working them both at the same time. They're not a massive studio. I think they have around 200 developers, 200 staff. So that's probably putting maybe like 75 developers on each one of those games. And the massive open world RPGs take a long time to put together. If there's any kind of development issues, and then actually like having to work for it to make sure it works both on consoles and PC. I recently watched a little series on the development of the Outer Worlds and all the hurdles they had to overcome in order to get out that game, making sure it worked for console and for PC. If it was for one or the other, it would have been much easier, but having it work for both, because each has different console has limitations that PC doesn't, and making it work for both. Same thing happening for Avowed and the Outer Worlds. More likely than not, they're trying to make sure that the game works perfectly or as best as possible on the new gen consoles as well. Obviously, it should run well on newer PCs. But just going along that lines and listening to the development that they went through on the Outer Worlds, I can imagine that they're probably going through similar iterations of the Avowed and the Outer Worlds 2 development, and that it seems likely that if they can possibly siphon off any resources from Grounded or any other, and then there was another project, another game they just announced that was smaller, if they can siphon resources and put those to the other games to get those finished, that would probably make sense. So we're not sure if anything is going to be released after 1.0 other than bug fixes. Hopefully they'll let us know when 1.0 comes out if there's a plan. It'd be really cool to see a roadmap. Like, I would much rather know yes or no, whether it's yes or no, if there's going to be content after 1.0, just so it's kind of like not up in the air and you're just sitting there waiting, and then 6 months later they just, after you've stopped playing the game and you've moved on to something else, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, a DLC's coming out. Of course, you could always jump back in, but it would definitely be nice to know what the roadmap's going to be after 1.0, so hopefully they announce that. So anyway, let me know what you think about the animated series. Are you interested in watching it? Are you excited as I am about watching it? Do you think it means that the future of Grounded is going to go beyond 1.0, or do you think it's just kind of they're just doing it and maybe we'll see, they're going to do a let's see what happens, or maybe it's just they're just doing it because they want to do it? Let me know in the comments down below. If you found the video interesting, make sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing for more videos just like this. If you want to support the channel even more, click the join card on the screen right now, or use the links down below to become a channel member or a patron. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.